Welcome to the best life possible, where we talk about changing your mindset, taking care of yourself, and living real good. And here's your host, Music Carolyn. Hey, y'all. Today we are talking about the abundance mindset with Margaret Kenney of therapist Margaret Kenney of Kenney Counseling Services. And we just wanted to take some time to talk about abundance. I am Carolyn. I am the founder of Affirm Tats. And this whole month we've been focused on abundance. So I just wanted to bring a professional on to talk about what abundance looks like in terms of mindset. So welcome, Mrs. Kenney. Take it away.
Yes. Hi. Thank you so much for having me. I greatly appreciate it. Just a little background about me is that I'm currently an online therapist for the state of Texas, and I specialize in depression, anxiety, and addictions. So, I provide online therapy sessions for anyone in the state of Texas. So please be sure to visit my website, www.kenneyonlinecounseling.com. And yes, just to speak to the topic for the month of having an abundance mindset, I think it's so important to really be aware of like our thought process, because our thoughts really determine on how we actually accept abundance within itself. And I guess the natural question would be like, where would our thoughts come from? So of course, our thoughts pretty much comes from things that we've experienced in life. So it's very important to really go through life and understand that these new experiences are just what they are, and that it's just important to just be open to these new experiences as they come through.
Wow, that's so important when you talk about new, right? When we think about abundance, technically from a definition standpoint, it's about creating a space or an experience, a life that is bubbling up with opportunity, right? So that means wherever you are in a mindset of abundance, you want to always be expecting, open, and available to receive more. Right. And it's specifically a positive mindset. Abundance is not about abundance of bad things, but an abundance of good things, and good things that are good for you. It's a personal abundance, right? Abundance has to be personalized. So that's so interesting that you're like being open to new experiences, because in a lot of ways, people may think, oh, I want money, I want this, I want that, and I want to be able to do this. But abundance, when we think about it in real time, is actually being open to saying, I'm available and open to receive more of the good that I want in my life, and I don't even know what that looks like. Right?
Exactly.
So it's like the newness of it is crazy, because there's so much fear in wanting more that you kind of only want what you think you know.
Exactly.
But accepting true abundance is saying, I don't even know what it could be, but I'm excited and I'm available and I'm open and I want to receive it.
Yes. And just having that mental space to be able to receive it, and not necessarily putting things in compartmentalizing new things that we're experiencing with our previous experiences, whether it is good or bad, because we always want to be able to accept the newness of just the things that we are experiencing in life. So for example, let's say it is, money. With that new experience of receiving more money, we want to be able to accept that new situation for what it is, and not necessarily go back to our previous relationship with money, and just kind of be in that moment, so that we can accept this newness of the money, and then just kind of create a new beginning and a new relationship with money, so that we are better able to understand who we are in this new level of abundance.
That's good. Yeah, I think money especially, people have so many, how do you say, thoughts about money, not only about personal experience with money, but because we see other people maybe who have more or less money than us, we color them a certain way depending on their money status, if you will. And so
Right.
our feeling of abundance also has this really weird way of making us feel we're in a certain space in society, right?
Mm-hmm.
And those things aren't true, because being or living in abundance, we're also reminded that the money doesn't actually dictate our abundance. It's a part of it, but it doesn't dictate it. That feeling of abundance should be there regardless of where the money is, and that
Mm-hmm.
allows us to not only, like you said, flow, allow it in, but also allow it out and not get so attached to it. Can you talk about maybe the non-attachment of the abundance mindset, and how that what that looks like, not only with money, but in relationships, in work, and different areas?
So I think it's important that when we are experiencing our new abundance, I think it's very important to always stay true to ourselves and as we grow. And I think it's important to really be able to separate, like as we I think it's important to really separate like our career and things like that as we grow, because sometimes we'll reach a level of success and then like we'll kind of stop to say like, okay, this is what I want or this is where I am, when in reality that level was probably just a stepping stone of moving forward. So I think it's very important to um just have that healthy balance of understanding that our successes and our failures all are working together so that we are able to like receive that abundance and not necessarily become too attached to things that we actually stop growing.
Mm, wow, that need for growth, right?
Yes, 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 yes. Because the need for growth allows us to have that abundance mindset and just to understand, not just, there are so many different areas that we grow. I know in like a lot of my clients, the main thing that we work on is really developing that self-worth, that self-esteem to continue to grow in that area, because they may have everything on paper checked off, but they may forget to understand like I do still need my own hobbies. I do still need my own areas of self-care and things like that, because what self-care looks like to one person, it definitely is not to another person. One person may think of self-care as, oh, getting their hair and nails done, whereas for another person they need to see something grow, and that's their self-care that really helps them flourish.
Can you talk more to failure, and especially in an abundance mindset?
I think it's very important to really focus on acceptance. I know that, a lot of times we look at failures as like the end of the world, but I think it's very important to understand that when it comes to just growth and just receiving abundance, that these failures are really like our ability to be exposed to things for the first time so that we can create that new understanding, that new relationship with whether it's money, careers, or things like that. I think it's very important to really understand that failure is really like a part of that understanding so that we are
Uh-huh.
able to continue to grow.
How much failure is allowed to enter the mind?
I think failure shouldn't failure isn't like a bad thing. It I think when it comes to failure, I think it's very important because a lot of times we're so hard on ourselves and we're just not nice to ourselves, for a lack of better words. And I think it's very important for us to understand that our failures are growth. You know what I mean? In a sense of like, let's
Mm-hmm.
say you're trying to become a let's say you're trying to become a teacher, and let's say you cannot pass that teaching certification. Just because you're unable to pass that certification, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're a poor teacher. It's just that this area of your life, or this one obstacle is just difficult for you to obtain. So I think it's important to always reevaluate our ability to, in that case, study, because maybe at that time you'll realize that you may not be a visual a studier. It may be best for you to get maybe some audiobooks, or maybe you need the group setting. I think it's important to look at failure in the sense of saying, okay, I didn't pass the first time. What is it that I can do to grow? Was it that I was
Right.
not being consistent with my studying? Was it that I was studying alone when in reality I study better in groups? Was it that, I'm listening to audiobooks and in reality I should be reading, or vice versa? I think it's important to really honestly just be nice to ourselves and not necessarily truly look at our failures as just meaning that we just need to completely stop at what we're doing. So I guess
Mm-hmm.
what amount of failure is acceptable? I think any amount of failure is acceptable. All failure is acceptable because that's how we grow, that's how we learn. And are we truly learning if we don't fail? Do we truly
Mm.
gain from the experience if we don't fail? I think it's very important for everyone to experience failure. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
even with children, I think it's very important that they experience failure and sadness and things like that, just so that they're okay with these emotions and just understanding that these emotions are natural. I know a lot of times we'll try to do things to try to like prevent ourselves from feeling a specific emotion, and there are so many times that I have to even ask my client, like, wow, have you cried about that yet? And then they're just looking at me so shocked. And I'm like, that's a lot. Like, you're going through a lot right now. It's okay to cry. It's okay to have that sadness moment so that you can kind of like release. It's not healthy
Mm-hmm.
to just say, I don't want to be sad about that anymore. Because if we don't take the time to truly be sad, then our body does it for us. Our body says, okay, I'm just
Oh,
gonna shut down instead of us having that moment. So I think an
wow.
acceptable yeah, I think an acceptable amount of failure is different for every person, in a
Mm-hmm.
sense of it's different because it's different because each of us, our strengths are different, so our failures are different as well, our goals are different. So I think for some people, if they are experiencing tremendous amounts of failure, they may not be noticing the amount of success that they're experiencing as well, because the more successful you are,
Mm-hmm.
the more failure you've experienced as well.
Right. That's so important to say. The more success, say that again. I want to make sure you say it.
The more successful you are, the more failures you have experienced. There are very few people that are extremely successful that can say, "Oh, I haven't failed at anything." Because there's
Mm-hmm.
always something, and what one person looks at as failure, another person may not look at as failure because it's so subjective. Like, for some,
Mm-hmm.
they may look at, like, let's say, oh, not having a parent's love, that's failure to
Mm-hmm.
them. Whereas someone
Mm-hmm.
else, they look at failure as, oh, they lost a licensure or something like that. So it's so subjective to everyone. But I think it's important to understand that, you know things are going to happen, and when they happen, it's okay, because it teaches us to really understand our emotions. And we
Yes.
never want to avoid our emotions. Like, it's okay to be sad and to cry and to have our isolation days. Like, those things are fine, because if we don't schedule them in, then our body will schedule them in the extent of like exhaustion or mental burnout and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow. Okay. It is so important that you brought up emotions because I am going to ask you about abundance mindset in relationships. Um, I think the thought of, like you said, internalizing and what we're talking about in terms of not crying or not addressing emotions that come up. Can you speak to what abundance mindset means, even for people in relationships that kind of bottle their emotions? So, even if this is a healthy relationship, they bottle their emotions around specific things. Or those who may be single who get into relationships and automatically say, I'm not an emotional person, or I don't I have issues with intimacy or whatever it may be. Can you talk about some of those limiting beliefs and how people can move towards a more abundance mindset in terms of emotions?
Yeah, I think it's very important when it comes to like emotions and being in a relationship, especially when you're both trying to experience abundance, or even if it's just one person who has that drive, because generally in a relationship, there's always one person that's like more driven, more just wanting for more than the other person. And that balance is just, it's just that it's balance, and it's so healthy. And it's not necessarily to say like, okay, one person, be the entrepreneur, one person be the 9 to 5, which of course, that may work. Or you can have two 9 to 5s or two entrepreneurs. But in a sense of like that abundance mindset, I think it's really important to be in tune with your emotions, because then it changes the way you look at life. Like, let's say a person is afraid of intimacy, or just afraid of the vulnerability, then it would really have to look at, okay, what was this person's childhood like when it comes to emotions? Because initially, how we were saying, like, our thoughts comes from our past, and then our thoughts determine our emotions. So it's more of like, what did you think about when you were experiencing, like, what were you thinking about when you were experiencing emotions, and how were your emotions approached as a child? Because for
Right.
one person, let's say they grew up in a household to where they didn't talk about emotions. It was just kind of like, they didn't talk about emotions, they didn't talk about failures. It was more of, you just have to keep going. And in that keep going
Mm-hmm.
mindset, or in that keep going household, you lose out on a sense of, not necessarily you lose out on a sense of self, but your sense of self is more attached to accomplishments, and it's not really attached to like who you truly are as a person, which later on
Yeah.
develops into like, other things such as like anxiety, but that's another conversation. But I'm
Right.
saying this to say that it's very important in a relationship to really have these conversations, because your relationship with your emotion is going to determine pretty much everything about you in terms of your growth. So if you're in a relationship and let's say your partner doesn't have specific understanding of his emotions, right? So in that relationship, a lot of common conversations associated with failure will be looked at differently. So if one person looks at failure like, okay, I didn't pass this exam, so what I'm going to do is I need to find another way to study that will be most helpful for me, right? So this person has a healthy
Mm-hmm.
understanding of their relationship with their own emotions and things like that. For others, whenever they fail, it's kind of like, I just can't it's more devastating to them, because as a child they didn't really develop that relationship with failure or with their own emotions. So I think it's
Right.
important to really have that conversation with your spouse about, okay, tell me, what was it like to show emotions as a child? You know what I mean? And a lot of times, we get the whole mindset of men shouldn't cry, or, you know, toughen up, things like that, which basically means hide your emotions, hide your emotions. But then it
Mm-hmm.
manifests itself into other things as an adult,
Mm-hmm.
which is like a
Wow.
lot of unhealthy behaviors.
Right. And so how do we, I mean, obviously your services do need to be tapped for some of these issues, if people are having a hard time addressing their emotions.
Yeah.
But can you just speak to how an incongruent relationship, how that person who maybe is able to name their emotions and able to separate themselves from their emotions, and so they're able to communicate about emotions, is it that if someone does have those issues with not being able to express emotions, should the person who's able to name those emotions bring that to the table, or should they choose how they express their emotions because it may make the other person shut down more? Like, is there a way to address that issue, or should it just be head on, allow the healthy person who can speak to emotions to express them, and whatever happens with the person who can't kind of just is left there? Like, how does that work?
I think it's very important. I think it's very important for the person who is capable to be patient with the other person, because what you're doing is you're teaching this other person it's okay to not be okay. And I think that that relationship in itself, when one person is fully capable of expressing their emotion and the other person just isn't, because maybe they maybe never had the space, they've never had this platform, they've never had the ability to truly express themselves. I think it's for the person that's capable, I think it's just amazing for them to just be patient and really speak
Mm-hmm.
to that person's inner child. And
Okay.
those relationships are like just so perfect. Like I've recently um had two clients that were in that situation, and it was just so amazing, like her patience for him and understanding that okay, this is a difficult conversation for him to have. It was just
Mm-hmm.
it was just enlightening. It was enlightening that
Mm-hmm.
she was able to just be so patient with him. So I think,
Mm-hmm.
of course, I believe everyone is capable of learning, right? Everyone is definitely capable of learning about who they are and their
Right.
emotions and things like that. I think it's the I think that in a relationship, it's just very important to really be patient with that person, because you have the skills. So you understand how difficult it would be for that other person, if that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah, that makes total sense. So give me like three ways of speaking to someone's inner child, because I didn't really know what that means. And then we'll like
Oh,
try to wrap it up.
okay. So, well, let me say this first. Let me kind of give that some context. So, in
Okay.
us, we all have like that id, the ego, and the super ego. So, basically, all of us, every person has that childish, playful side in them. And then all of us have like that adult in us, to where it's kind of like, okay, these are the things that I want to do. I understand, like, just that kind of like that adult person in us, right? But then we all have this other person that's like pure perfection. Like everything has to be perfect. There's no room for error. We don't have time to play or anything like that. I think it's important that when we talk to people, it's important to really just ask questions. Like, for example, if I'm asking someone, hey, how's your day? And they're like, my day has been, full of ups and downs, but I'm doing great, and I'm like, okay, good. So they're kind of talking to me from like that middle person to say, like, okay, I'm comfortable with having a conversation. Or even if simple as, how's your day? And let's say they respond like it's horrible, everything is bad, like I just can't believe this is a day, then of course I'm speaking to their child, right? Because it's kind of like the,
Mm-hmm.
the the child in us is incapable of understanding, complex things, even though the person asking the question may not be asking a complex question, but the child in us
Yes.
is kind of like in that playful mood. And then let's say the super ego, like that perfectionist person, is just saying, every day is a great day. And it's just like, no, it's not, but okay. But I think it's important to, I think it's important that when we are like, let's say we're having a conversation with someone who is not emotionally intelligent, I think it's important to see where they are. And so if we are going to talk to that child, that the child in a person, I think it's important to, I guess, three questions to know in terms of like who we're actually talking to. So if, let's say, to speak to a person's child in them, it's kind of like, okay, so what is your creative side like? Just to kind of let them know what is their creative side like, or just to ask them, what are your favorite foods or things like that, just to kind of gain an understanding. And I'll give a bit of TMI. I know for me, when we were in like marriage counseling or premarital counseling, my husband disclosed, my favorite food is catfish. And then the pastor was like, well, why? And then he was able to explain, like, well, this is what my grandfather made with me. Well, this is what we ate every summer with my grandfather. We would go fishing, and then like they would fish for catfish and things like that. And so like that's his favorite food. Even now into his 40s, it's still his favorite food, because that's his
Yeah.
understanding of that. So I guess what I'm saying that to say, like, it's very important to really have those conversations to see at what place in a person is their childlike side being exposed. So when my husband eats catfish, that's a part of his childlike behavior because it's where he was first introduced to it.
Okay. Wow, that's profound. Yeah, because you never really know. It's not
Right,
black and
right.
white.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Okay. Interesting. Well, we've almost made it to 30 minutes, so I just wanted to say thank you for this talk today about the abundance mindset. Thank you for giving us tools. And I just want to ask you, is there anything else you want to add and go ahead and promote your counseling services? And yeah, I just want to say thank you.
You're so welcome. This was so fun, and I would totally love to do this again. So
Yeah.
again, my name is Margaret Kenney with Kenney Counseling Services. My website is www.kenneyonlinecounseling. I'm providing online mental health services for residents of the state of Texas, and it's called telehealth. So it's a telehealth platform where um, everything is secure, everything is personal. You can do it from wherever you feel most comfortable, whether it's from your car. All that we need is just a strong internet connection. I accept many insurances, and also self-pay on a sliding scale for clients as well. My Instagram is Kenney_counseling. Yeah, that's how you can reach me. Oh, and I'm also on Clubhouse at mkenney13, Texas online therapist.
Yay. That is awesome. Thank you all those listening. I am Carolyn. I am the founder of Affirm Tats. I am along with you all listening to the journey of abundance and a journey of just affirming what I believe to be true about myself on a daily basis. So I'm not a therapist. I'm not a yoga teacher. I am just someone who really cares about being happy and being peaceful and living a life that outwardly expresses that. And so that's why I manifested Affirm Tats. We sell temporary tattoos that have affirming words on them and phrases. And I can be reached at affirmtats.com and everywhere on social media at Affirm Tats. That's AFFIRMTATS. And yeah, thank you guys for listening.
Thank you for listening to the Best Life Possible podcast with Music Carolyn. You can find us setting intentions on Sundays on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Affirm Tats. You can also get your wearable words of affirmation at affirmtats.com.